What's up everybody, welcome to Balkan Motor. Today we're going to learn how the carburetors work.
Zaidi, Zaidi. Zaidi,
Alright, so to begin, let's first define some of the parts of the carburetor so that we're referring to the proper things. I realized that the names I've been using for a lot of the things have been wrong in the past, so I did research and found the proper names. So, firstly, to begin with, we have the top piece here where the diaphragm usually sits. Diaphragm is this rubber piece with a piston and a needle at the bottom. So up here we'll see a few things. So we're gonna see two air jets right here, and we also see another air jet right here. Now that last one actually gets actuated by the choke. So if I pull the choke, you can see it opens up. So we'll define that as the choke air jet. The one on the bottom here, that is the idle or slow jet air jet, and the other one is the main air jet. Next, we're going to take a look at the bottom of the carburetor. So this is where the fuel usually would sit and the floater would pass up and down. The floater being this plastic piece. It usually sits in here like so and floats up and down as fuel goes up and down in this bottom part of the carburetor. Now here we have this fuel jet and the two that fit in here. The one that you see in here is actually hooked up to the choke circuit. The one that would sit in the lower portion is our slow fuel jet, which is this guy right here. So he would fit in the small port right here. Right, and that's also hooked up to the idle circuit. And then in the main port, we have the main jet, which fits in there like so. Right. Another thing to mention in here is the fuel screw that goes into this space right here. That looks like so. So you see it has a hole in the middle, and it fits in there. That's where fuel goes into the chamber and fills it up. In the hole on top of that screw sits a little spring actuated pin that essentially plugs the hole as the floater lifts up, essentially preventing there being too much fuel in the system. Next, we're going to look through the center of the carburetor. As you already see, there is a butterfly or throttle valve right in the middle of it that I can actuate by turning this. So when you twist your throttle, that's what opens up and down. A few things to mention on this side. So this is the side that hooks up to the engine. We have a port up here, which is our idle and choke port. And then we also have a very small hole on the bottom right here, which is actually connected to this circular piece right here. Now fuel goes right around it and throughout that hole. The one thing that regulates how much fuel is there is a fuel screw that goes in here, which is our idling fuel, or actually fuel to air ratio mix screw, which sits in here. Next, we're going to move on to the intake. In the intake, we see a few things. A port right here, which actually goes right back to the top and into the diaphragm space. So that's kind of the main air supply to the diaphragm. And then we have this port right here, which goes all the way through. You can kind of follow it on the outside. So going through here and then up into the choke and then down out through the port. So that hole here is actually our idle and choke hole. Okay, now that we've gone over the different parts of the carburetor, we can start looking at the cycle of operation of the carburetor itself. So in a situation where we have the engine being cold and we want to do a cold start, with these old carburetor bikes you would want the choke to be fully open. So by having the choke fully open, as we mentioned before, the choke port at the top is fully open. So that, as you can see, I can put that in there. So that's fully open. So that allows for essentially the circuit that would, as we turn the key essentially and press the starter, the starter in the engine turns the engine over, creating a vacuum in the cylinders. Now that vacuum pulls air out this way through the air port and through the little fuel port at the bottom. Now from that air port, we have air being drawn all the way down through that circuit at the back and out to the port through here. As well as, because the choke is open, so as the choke is open, now that would also pull air out of the top, which means that there's a vacuum created going into here and then out through the top and then into this area. Now what that would also mean, since we're getting vacuum going through here, air is going to start going down the main slow jet. From that slow jet we go down, and then that connects to the main idle idle passageway. And since there's vacuum in there already through this port, air goes right into that. But that passageway is actually connected down to the idle jet, so it draws fuel up through this way as well. So we get essentially fuel coming up, air coming in, both going through this passageway down this way, as well as more air coming in through the top. And then on the back side we have the choke passageway, which essentially drives more air into this passageway here. We also have air coming in through the main air jet, which pushes down and again into the main circuit, as well as so actually that circuit, you can see, kind of goes down and then out to this side and then back up, connecting with the choke passageway. As that air goes down into there, it also pulls, there is a small passageway in here that pulls fuel from the main jet. So that provides that little extra fuel for the choke system on that initial cold start. Now as the engine combusts, that creates more vacuum, and then the entire cycle repeats again and again and again and again, drawing in more air through the top, pushing it down through the passageways, more fuel up, and then spraying it out through the two ports here and here into the cylinders and combusting. Now once the engine is warmed up, we close off the choke, so the choke returns, so from this position the choke returns back down. The port up here closes down, which in turn closes the passageway for this entire system on the back, which stops drawing air into the the main air jet, and which also stops drawing fuel from that extra passageway from the main fuel jet. So we're essentially left just with air going in through here, going out to the top, going down the slow jet, So going down the slow jet and going down to this passageway, pulling in fuel from the slow jet at the bottom and then out through here, and then the little extra fuel from there. And that is kind of how the engine idles. It's just that idle passageway from the slow jet at the top, the small jet or the slow jet at the bottom, both going through this passageway and then into the cylinder at the end. Now what happens when we open the throttle, the dynamics of the carburetor actually change quite a bit. So as the butterfly flap opens up, that creates a huge vacuum through the main center of the carburetor. So through this area in the middle, we see that opens up and that creates vacuum there. Now what that means is we have more airflow coming in through this side, which in turn drives more airflow through this top bit here. What that in turn does is air pressure builds up in here, which takes the diaphragm and essentially applies pressure on it, which pulls it up. Now there is a spring that usually, so this diaphragm usually sits in here like so, and there's a spring in the middle, so the cap holding everything together, right? So as air pressure builds up, this lifts up, compressing the spring and creating a big air volume in here. Now that pipes more air down the slow jet, and as that lifts up in here, you see the needle on the bottom. There is a port in there, so as you see, as the needle goes down, it's supposed to go down into that little metal port at the bottom. So as this lifts up, that needle comes out of that port. Now that port is directly connected to the main jet, or actually it goes down into this metal brass piece, which the main jet is connected on an angle connecting to it. So the diaphragm sits in here going down into the metal piece, and the main jet goes into here connecting directly to it. So as that needle comes up, it frees up more space, creating vacuum in that jet down the center, which pulls in large amounts of fuel through the main jet, squirting it into the main shaft in the middle, mixing with all the air that's already coming in through this side, and then goes into here. At wide open throttle, that piston is pretty much all the way at its topmost position, freeing up the entire space and freeing up a huge amount of space in that jet at the bottom, which draws the most amount of fuel, pushing it into the engine and combusting that way. So now that we know how everything in here actually works, there is a few things to also mention about the carburetors. Since this is not a single cylinder carburetor, a single cylinder engine, we actually have 4 cylinders, which means we have 4 carburetors. Now, if each carburetor worked correctly, the engine will start, but it will likely run like shit. Now that's because, seeing these linkages here, these hook up to all 4 of them. Now, if these are not properly aligned and calibrated, so in particular with this one, if they're not properly calibrated, when you pull the choke, it may not open the choke ports completely on all 4 carburetors, which would mean that some of them will be getting less additional air and fuel, and some will be getting more. The other thing is this linkage here connects to the throttle. So if these are not all synchronized to open all at the same time, same problem. You'll be getting some of the carburetors getting more air and fuel and some not getting as much, which of course hurts power, and you're not getting your engine running as efficiently as it should be. So, and carburetor synchronization is of huge importance for having a carburetor engine running properly. As I mentioned earlier, the other important piece of the puzzle here is that you have each carburetor properly adjusted for the air to fuel ratio with the adjuster screw, such that you're getting the right amount of fuel in there. which could have varying impacts from cylinders firing in weird ways, getting too much air, or having popping on releasing the throttle, running too rich, too lean. So varying aspects of that. So that is a very finicky adjustment that needs to be dealt with. Another thing to mention, which I had been completely wrong about, was how the airflow works with this particular motorcycle. Now, these carburetors all mount under the air box, which is this big chunk right here. So the carburetors literally mount into it like so. So the four of them mount at the bottom. Now what that means is that air is flowing in down this way into the box. Now looking at this box, obviously you see that it was meant to take in air through here, down through the main filter that sits at the bottom of here, and down into the box and through the these rubber boots that kind of sit in there like this, and then into the carburetors. Now if we look at the 1982 Sabre, that actually had a very different airbox. That airbox kind of ended right about here, and then the sides of it were actually open ports with the filters and boxes sitting on either side. Now, because of the aerodynamics of the motorcycle, Honda, I guess, realized that that was not very efficient, and the following year, the 1983, they essentially made the Sabre have this sort of setup, which is very interestingly engineered. This big airbox at the top and the size of those rubber boots that sit in here are actually precisely calculated such that as air flows in, the amount of volume of air that's in here and the shape of these boxes makes the air vibrate and resonate just at the right amount, just at that right amount, that right point, such that the air pressure from that resonance forces more air down the carburetors. Now, my initial idea was to obviously revert it back to the old style with having the filters on the side, but if I were to do that, that would obviously lose all of that engineering that's gone behind this and all that efficiency out of the induction system. Because it's using that air pressure, this almost acts like a forced induction system, like a turbo or a supercharger. Obviously not as high pressure, but similar type effect. So I guess what I'll have to do is figure out how to utilize this or repair it, and then figure out where to put my electronics down. But that's definitely a piece of engineering that should not be ignored and definitely be utilized for the future. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Now that we know how these things work, we're going to move on to probably reassembling them and getting them back onto the engine. So make sure to subscribe, click the little bell to get notifications when new videos become available. Also make sure to check out balkanmoto.com, where I post articles detailing each of these videos with more diagrams, more pictures, more detailed descriptions. And as always, make sure to check me out on Instagram, where I post pictures and sneak peeks of things that I do, inspirational motorcycle builds that I found around the internet, as well as things that I see around town. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.